Guys, welcome back. In this lesson, we'll be creating all the URL routes that are required to handle the creation and updation and deletion for these two models. We'll type in some comments to see which routes we'll be wanting. We're wanting a get task lists list route, and then we'll be wanting to get a specific task list. So task list slash ID. We also would want to create a new task list. So post task list. Also, don't forget to precede all of these routes with slashes. So this is how your URL should look like. The next thing we'd want to do is to get all the to-dos in a task list. So get to-dos, and there will be a query parameter of task list, which will be a task list ID. Another thing we want to do is to post a new task, a new to-do, a new task. We'd also want an update route so that we can update the status of the task and set it to completed or incomplete. So we'll use the put. We'll use the put tasks and ID of the task. So also, we'd also want a route that we can use to delete the tasks. With a specific ID. Now let's get started with the first route. So the first route is app.route task lists, and this task list will return a list of all the task lists that are stored in our database. So we'll name the function get task lists. Now to return JSON from your database, we'll be using a library called JSONify. So we'll import JSONify, which will help us parse our response into JSON. Another thing we want to do is import another tool called request, which will help us meddle with the request that we are receiving. So in this, we want to get a list of all the task lists that are stored in this in our database. And to do that, we'll create a variable called task lists, which will hold all the task lists, and we'll do task. We'll write the name of the class task list, and we type in .query /all, and this will give us a list of task lists, and it will get stored in our task lists variable. Let's print out task lists to see what response we get. To run this, we will have to make sure that our database is running. The next thing we would want to do is open up our browser, and in the localhost, and open up localhost 5000 and enter the URL we just created, task list. As you can see, it says global name task list is not defined. That was because I had typed in print task list instead of task lists. So I will save this and reload the page. Nothing will happen really, because it is showing that the view function did not return any valid response because we haven't returned anything from this function. As you can see in our terminal application, it printed out an empty array, which means that there are no task lists stored yet. We will create a Python list called task list and initialize it as an empty array, and then we loop over all the entries in the task list object for task list in task lists. We create a new task list object, which is a new task list dictionary. We'll set this dictionary's uh, ID to be the ID of the object task list, and this dictionary's name key to be the to be the name of this task list. And then we will append this new dictionary that we've created to this task list of variable. To do that, task list dot append t, and then we will need to return the JSON value using the JSONify function, and we'll pass in lists equals to task list. Now if we hit save and reload our function, we can see that it returns an empty array with the name list. So this is because we haven't created any list yet, and to do that we need to do the following. We'll open our Python console. We will import the db object from the app Python file, and once we have that, we'll also need to import the task list class from the app file. Now once we have that, we can create a new task list object. To do that, let's type it tl is equal to task list, and in the initializer we'll pass in the name of this task list. So let's say work. That creates a new task list object. To save this into the database, will add in db.session add tl, which is the new task list object that we've just created. And to commit this to the database, we'll type in db.session.commit. Now this means that we have a new task list object saved in the database, and to confirm that, we will reload our task list endpoint, and you can see now that we have a new task list with ID 1 and name work. We can also create a new task list and name it home, and we can add this task list to the session and commit it to the database. Now if we reload this, we have two task lists created. The first task list is named work, and the second task list is named home. So this is how you can create new database models from the terminal. Now I will show you how to create a new task list from our API code, and to do that, we will meddle with the post task list endpoint, and I will add a new route, add.route task lists, and for this we'll add a new method by using the methods initializer, and in that list we will type in post. So this route will get invoked every time we make a post request to this API. We'll create a new function called create task list, and in this function we'll take in the data that we're passing in from the JSON request. So it will be data equal to request dot get JSON, and this means that our data object now stores the JSON request that we have sent to our API from our server. So next thing we need to do is create a new task list object. So the data variable will look something like this. We'll have a JSON which will have the name of a task list, something like this. So we need to extract the name property from this data variable, and to do that we will type in we will type in name is equal to data name, and this is because data is a Python dictionary. Now we can create a new task list object by tl is equal to task list and pass in the name that we've received from the request, and then we can add in db.session.add. We'll add the task list object to this database session, and we will then commit it to the database, db_session.commit. And if all of this goes through, we will return jsonify message. We'll return a message and tell them it's created. We'll also pass in a HTTP code which is 201, which represents that we have successfully created something. So then we will hit save. So to test if this endpoint is working, we will open up an application called Postman. So this is how Postman looks like. Now here we can type in different types of requests that we can send, and then we can type in the URL of the request. So we will send a post. We are testing out a post request, and to check whether a Postman client is working, we'll make a GET request to localhost 5000 and task lists endpoint, which is the endpoint that returns the list of all the task lists. So we hit send, and you can see that this Postman client is working. It returns the two task lists that we created. The next thing we want to test out is the post request, and we'll be sending the post request to the same endpoint, but in this body tag we will set raw. We will set the raw option and type in application JSON, and in the JSON object we'll have a name property which will be set to the name of the list that we want to create. So let's name a new list personal. Then we'll send this request to the API, and it will send us a message called task list created and also a status of 201 created, and this was because we had passed in the 201 code along with this request. So if you reload, if you send the get request again to task lists, we'll have three task lists now, so which is work, home and personal. The next route that we'll be working on is get, which returns all the tasks for a specific task list. And to do that, we'll create another app route. Name it as tasks and give it a method and then we'll add a handler method which will handle whenever this route gets invoked. So it will be get tasks. Now we need to receive the query task list that is passed in the URL. To do that, we will type in we'll create a new variable called task list ID, which is equal to request dot args dot get, and our parameter name is task list. For now, we will just try returning this argument and seeing whether it is able to parse it. So we'll return jsonify task list ID is equal to task list ID, and then we'll hit save, and in our Postman we make another guest request to tasks, but we won't send any query with it. So it returns that the task list ID is null. To add a query to it, you proceed with a question mark, then type in task list and equal to and give it a task list ID, let's say 1, and let's hit send. Now you can see that it is parsing our query and returning task list ID equals 1. So we can use the task list ID, and return the tasks that are enclosed inside those task lists, which is basically all the tasks whose task list ID property is this query that we've passed. To do that, we will create another object called tasks, and then we will query the task class, and we'll use filter by method. And in this filter by method, we will pass list id equals to task list id. Then we will iterate over all the tasks for I for task in tasks. We'll create a new dictionary so that we can pass it to JSON. We'll set the ID of this task to be the ID attribute of the task object. Then we'll set the text to be the text attribute of the task object. Then we'll set the list ID key of this dictionary to be the list ID attribute of the task object. And then we will append it to a new list called task list. And we will return the task list for that specific task list, the list of tasks for that specific task list. To do that, we will just return this list that we have serialized in the form of JSON and return it with the tasks key. So we will hit save, and I'm just putting this here and send this request. Now we see an empty tasks list uh, array because we haven't created a task yet. To create a task, update the post task endpoint, and to do that we'll create another app.route, which will be tasks. Method would be post, and we will create a new handler function called create task. To get the JSON request, we will again create a data variable that will take the request and convert it to JSON and store it into the data file. Now our data should look something like this. We'll have the text. Now the data variable should look something like this. We'll have the text something, and then we'll have the list ID some integer. So we need to extract the text and the list ID from the data dictionary. We will do that by creating a new variable called text, and we will extracting the key. And same for the list ID, we'll create a new variable called list ID and extract it using the list ID key. And we'll create a new task object. So to do that, we'll create a task object and invoke the class and pass in the name, the text and list ID for this task. Once we have done that, we will return the JSON, which will give us a message similar to the message we returned over here, which is task list, which is task created, and we'll also pass in a 201 HTTP code so that it can be handled in the front end later on. And then we will add this task to the session, database session, db.session.add. Then we will commit the database. We will send this post request, make a new post request to the tasks endpoint, and in the body we will set the text to buy groceries and the list ID to 2 because 2 represents the home task list. So we will set the list ID to 2 and then we send the request, and it will send us a 201 created status. Now we can query the tasks by sending a get request to the URL tasks, querying it by task list equals 2, and then we'll hit the send request, and then it will return an array of tasks. We have one task created in this tasks object which has the ID of 2, list ID of 1, list ID of 2, and has text buy groceries. Now the thing we're missing is the status of the task here. Now by default, whenever a task is created, the status should be incomplete, which means the completed property should be false. To do that, we will edit the init function and we will set self dot completed equals to false. And now we'll send a new post request false, and then we'll add that to the serialized JSON. So t status completed is equal to task dot completed. We'll hit a new post request and name this take dog for walk, and hit send. It will give us the message that the task was created, and then we will send a get request to this query and hit send. Now we have two tasks in this task list, which is take dog for walk and buy groceries. As you can see, the first completed attribute of the first task is null because we didn't set it in as initializer, but once we've set that in the initializer, the default comes out to be false. Now that we're able to create the tasks, the next thing we'd want to do is to edit a specific task. To do that, we'll first add in a route to the tasks, and we will pass in an ID parameter through this. Also, we'll set the methods for this route as put. Now the put HTTP method is required to edit or update an existing resource. So we will type in put. We'll create a new handler function called update task, and we will pass the ID that we received from our URL parameter in this method. First, we will get the task with that specific ID. To do that, we will create a task object. We will query the task class, and we will filter by the ID and set it to the ID we received from the list, and we will use the first result because we only have one task with a specific ID, and then we will update its completed to whatever its completed is not. For example, if we send an update request to update this task, its completed should be set to true because it's false right now. If we send another update to this task, it should be sent to false because it would have been true by that time. So we'll change the task dot completed equals to true is equal to not of task dot completed, and then we will add this to the session db.session.add task, and then we will commit it to the database. Now to check whether this works, we will return a JSON with the task. First, we will return a message updated. The next thing we want to return is the task itself. The task ID equal to task dot ID. Then we want to return the status of the task and check whether it was updated. Task dot completed is equal to task dot completed. We will hit save. I made a syntax error here. I should write a not. We'll run the server again. Now we will send a put request. We create a new request. We will make it a put request. In the put request, we will make it to the localhost 5000 and pass in the ID of the task. Let's say 1, let's say 2, because we've already set the completed property here. So let's say 2, and then we send, sorry, the URL is tasks and the ID is 2. Then we'll hit send. Now you can see that it says it's updated and the task completed is set to true for this task ID. If you want to confirm, right now we're seeing false. We'll send this request again and now we're seeing true. So that means we were able to update this specific task for this task list. The last function that we want to add to this API is to delete tasks. So we will add in another route and we will set this to the tasks endpoint and pass in the ID of the task we want to delete. And for delete, we need to pass in a method called delete. We'll create a new handler function called delete and pass in the ID we received from the parameters. Then we'll query the task class to get the specific task. Query and filter by the ID, which is the ID we got from the parameter. Then we will type in task dot remove, and then we will remove the task object from the database session. To do that, we'll type in db.session.remove and pass in this task object, and we will commit it to the database. And if all of this goes through, we will return a JSON and type in the message deleted. Now let's try doing this. Right now we have two tasks, one with ID 1 and one with ID 2. The first task does not have the completed property, so we want to delete this right now. To do that, we will create a new request, a new delete request to http localhost 5000 and tasks. and we'll pass in the ID, which is 1. We want to delete this task, and we'll pass in the ID of that task. Now we will hit the send request. I'm sorry, I need to update this. Instead of the remove function, we need to use the delete function. So we will update the code here. We'll set it to delete and we'll hit save, and we'll press send. As you can see, it's returning the error unmapped instance error. That's because we're passing in the query itself. We cannot delete a query. We can delete an object that was returned from the query. So we need to pass in the first method here. Once that is done, we will save it and hit send. As you can see, we get a message of deleted. Now, if we go to the list of tasks that we had created, we will send another get request to get all the tasks. And now we only get one task because we were able to delete the earlier task. So congratulations, if you followed with me correctly, you were able to make a complete CRUD API from scratch that handles two database models, the task list model and the task model. We can get all the task lists, we can create a new task list, we can get a list of tasks for a specific task list, we can also create new tasks, update the task and set its completed to true or false. Then we can also delete specific tasks, and you were able to do this from scratch. So congratulations on that. In the next video series, we'll be joining our backend and front end to make a complete web application. So see you there.